Talking baseball, baseball and the O's.
Oh, welcome back, Birdland, to another episode of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. I am your host, Benny Becker. Of course, thrilled to be with you, gang, here today. Fantastic episode on our hands, folks. We have to wrap up the Washington Nationals series. They got through that 2-game set, so we're going to catch you up on what happened in that series. We want to touch on Kyle Bradish and Corbin Burnes and kind of that duo that we've seen the past couple weeks since Bradish has been back, and really just touch on each of them and how important they are to the team. I think the number one story right now in Birdland today is talking Craig Kimbrel. We've talked to him multiple times so far on this podcast, including last episode. Well, we got more to talk about after last night, and we'll talk about that. We'll touch on that. Have a couple rehab assignments going on currently, whether it's Austin Hayes or Grayson Rodriguez. We will catch you up on both of them. We have a little new series from Norfolk. We want to get Norfolk back in the mix on this show. We want to talk Jackson Holiday, Kyle Stowers, Kobe Mayo, Cade Povich, and Chase McDermott. You gotta love them. You gotta love what these kids are showing you down on the farm, so we will touch on that. Kind of want to touch a little bit on the possibility of a 6-man rotation for these Orioles in the near future. Also, need to talk about the streak that keeps on going up to 103 now. We will touch on that later. And also, I have a bit of a prediction that I think I'm going to end the show with. It certainly shouldn't be shocking when I get to it. But listen, it's still early in the season, and this is a prediction that I definitely think is bound to come at some point for these Orioles at some point during the season, and a couple names of which might fall into that prediction. But let's just get started. We had the 2-game set against the Nationals, and coming into it last episode, I said that I expected kind of us to split the series with these Nationals. They've been a very pesky team. They have talent, but they're still young. They're still trying to find their way in Major League Baseball. But certainly they're pesky and they're tough. They don't really go away at all. In fact, I believe they're tied still for the league in comeback victories this season, I believe at 11. So they're not an easy team. And while they're sitting right around 500 to start this series, I believe it was a game under 500 to start the series, it was tough. And listen, in a 2-game set against kind of a cross town, if you want to call it that, rival in the Nationals. And frankly, I didn't look at historical numbers. I meant to before I jumped on this episode, but I feel like the Nationals always play the Orioles tough. Now, you could sit there and say, well, for the majority of the time that the Nationals have been a franchise, the Orioles have kind of stunk. And the Nationals have actually been pretty good for long stretches of that time. So while it might be flip-flop now, historically between these teams, typically the Nationals had the better roster than the Orioles. At the very least, they both were kind of rebuilding at the same time during other years. So it's not the perfect sample size. I think that's why I kind of chose to not look it up and not get the exact statistics. But coming into this, I felt like the Nationals always played the Orioles tough, and that there's always kind of funkiness in this series. So it's no surprise that that's kind of the series we got, gang. And I'll be the first one to say, kind of feeling pretty good that we split the 2 games. You know, the Nationals took the first one, we took the second one. We'll touch on the games more in depth, at least that second game, maybe not the first one as much. But again, it was just one of these series that's kind of a little goofy on your schedule, a little tricky, and one of those things that you got the sense, or at least I did, coming into it, that a split could be on the horizon. So no surprise that that is what happened. As a gambler, I actually took a big loss on the 2 games. Obviously had the Orioles to win in that game 1. Had them to win by 2 or more runs in that second game. And so 3 times I had heartbreak as far as that run line was concerned. But I always say this, and I stand by it. I'd much rather lose money with the Orioles still winning the game than vice versa. Somehow make money even though the Orioles lost. That's not what I'm in it for. I'm in it for amusement. I'm in it for enjoyment. If I make money, great. I'd much rather the Orioles continue to ascend through Major League Baseball and continue to win games at a great pace, which they have done. And frankly, we're going to touch on this too, because the first 36 is complete. So we're going to touch on that at some point. They hit that 24-12 mark that I was talking about a month and a half ago. I was talking about in spring training wanting to get to that 24 win mark in the first 36 games. The Orioles have accomplished that. So unbelievable things. And we're not going to touch too much on it, frankly, simply because I want to do kind of a quarter recap after the first 40 games. So since that's only just in a few games, I want to make sure I don't kind of spill the beans too early and give away what we're going to be talking about that day. So we'll touch on it, but that's mainly for another day. Just very exciting. And excuse me if my other dog, I know in last episode I told you that our one dog passed. My other dog currently is at the window howling. So hopefully that doesn't bother us. If it gets too bad, we may take it cut, take the pup out, and come back and finish the episode. But let's jump right back into it. Let's jump into it, gang. We're going to start with game 1, and it's going to be kind of a quick recap. Orioles lose 3-0 on the day. Only 3 hits in the whole game by the Orioles. They had 4 guys left on base, 0 for 1 with runners in scoring position. Literally, we shouldn't even call it runners in scoring position. 0 for 1 with their runner in scoring position. Certainly just not the day for the Orioles offensively. And Williams shut them down. The Nats bullpen shut them down. They faced some tough arms during that stretch. So it's no surprise it happens sometimes during the season where even the best offensive teams like the Orioles are not going to be able to get it done that night. That's kind of what we saw in game 1. Burns, though, had a great outing, 6 1/3. Started to get away from him a little in the 7th. That's where 2 of the 3 earned runs came in. All 3 were on singles, so it wasn't like he was getting hit hard. He really worked himself out of some jams, kept the Orioles in the game, which is what you want to see from your ace. And frankly, more often than not, the Orioles can win that game. If they only give up 3 earned, maybe all 3 by Corbin Burns, but through 6 1/3, that's not too bad, gang, right? So you'll take that any day of the week, and it sucks when that lines up with the Orioles just not hitting. And that's been a couple times already where we've seen that with Corbin Burns on the bump. And it stinks because the Orioles as a whole were undefeated in games started by Burns or GrayRod for a while. And it seems like at least the last couple or a couple of the last few, let's say, haven't gone their way. And the script last or 2 nights ago was just not being able to hit. You know, we would get some guys on base here and there, very few and far between. Clearly only 4 guys. But still, just one of these things where you still had a chance. Like, if you get that big hit there, if you get a nice home run, before you know it, it's 3-2. And maybe the vibes are able to get it done that night. Unfortunately, that was not the case. They dropped the first one, putting their sweepless streak that was at 102 headed into the series at stake. And it's the 13th time ever in that period that the Orioles had faced the final game of a series where they might lose that streak, which is still very impressive, and we'll touch on that more. So we go into game 2. And like I already told you, the Orioles came away with the victory. It was a beautiful thing because they just would not stop fighting. The Nationals, though, did not stop fighting either. So we'll touch on all of it. And ultimately, the easiest way to get it kicked off is Brandon Hyde's quote after the game, which is, quote, a lot to unpack. And that's not necessarily a ringing endorsement for anybody or the team in general. But I think that along those lines, it's more about how they're good and then they're bad. Like, we're seeing some good stuff, but we're also seeing some trouble. And we'll touch on that as we get through this game, all right? So the Nats ended up taking a 1-0 lead in the second on an RBI single. Listen, nothing crazy. And Kyle Bradish was on the bump, actually pitched a fantastic game. He was getting himself into a lot of jams early. It didn't seem like he had the control, especially on breaking balls early into that game. But he was able to battle, get some big strikeouts, and work through jams without allowing more than that one earned run, which was a great thing. Not only kept the Orioles in it, but really set them up to take the lead and dominate that game, which they did pretty much all through it, but maybe jumping ahead a little, okay? So then Santander tied the game with a solo home run in the fourth. Gunnar matched it with a solo home run in the sixth, making it 2-1 Orioles. At that point, the Orioles then got another run to extend the lead to 3-1 in the seventh. Started with a Westberg double, then a Mateo sac bunt, really just doing everything he can for this team. And then Kowser hit a sac fly, driving in the run, getting the Orioles to 3-1, which obviously in the grand scheme of just baseball and winning games is immensely important. Anytime you can add an insurance run, as Ben McDonald said, or maybe it was Melanie Newman last night, it allows you a mistake, right? It allows you to make a mistake and still win the game. Now, for me, betting the Orioles -1.5 last night, it got me to the number I needed at the moment, but certainly didn't give me any insurance, which came back to, I think, bite everybody, but neither here or there. So, like I said, 3-1, headed into the ninth. Craig Kimbrel comes in, and he's been shaky as of late, but we've seen really good stuff. So, while we're nervous when he comes in, right? I was nervous, and it didn't start out great on the first pitch. He nearly pegged the batter in the head, narrowly missing him on the very first pitch. Reeled it back in, got it back like the professional he is, and got that batter and the second batter out. So the first two batters of the inning are out, 2 outs, bottom of the ninth, up 2. You're thinking, oh, great. You have the 8-hitter, I believe, up. Eddie Rosario, 8-hitter. Now, given he's a professional, he's somewhat of a veteran, especially on the Nationals roster, but unfortunately, Rosario takes Kimbrel deep to dead center, essentially, maybe right center a little, but torched the ball, ruins my 1.5 at the times, but again, I want the Orioles to win over making money, right? So, to me, I was annoyed, but I was like, okay, just get the last out, Craig, and we're fine, and I'm happy, and we win. It wasn't so easy, because after that pitch, it went off the rails again for Kimbrel. Walked the batter, gave up a steal, walked the next batter, so now still first and second, but even after the steal, but then he gets pulled. And this is something we're kind of getting used to in Birdland with Craig Kimbrel. And we're going to harp on that at some point this episode and kind of talk more about his recent struggle numbers and kind of what the heck we do. What the Orioles are saying, what I think they should do, what Birdland thinks they should do. Because I know, again, it's the biggest talking point probably right now in Baltimore and for these Orioles is Craig Kimbrel and what the heck to do with him. So, Keegan Akin comes in, ends up giving up an RBI single, which stinks, to C.J. Abrams. And listen, Abrams has that wacky reverse split, so he's better against lefties despite hitting left-handed. And frankly, he's their most talented hitter. So I was even wondering if it would have been smart maybe to, and this sounds crazy, walk him and pitch to a less talented hitter. But then you're putting the tying run on third, winning run on second. I don't necessarily love that move either. So I'm not going to criticize them pitching to CJ Abrams there. But unfortunately, Aiken gives up the single, tying the game before he can get out of the inning. And listen, Keegan Aiken's been great. And in fact, I think that now makes only the third of 10 inherited runners that scored on him this season. So certainly doing a better job than not in those situations. And has some tremendous numbers as far as rankings as a whole in relievers in baseball right now. Keegan Aiken has been phenomenal this season. So I'm not putting that on him. I'm putting it on Craig Kimbrel. If anything, Kimbrel, despite even the Orioles winning this game, deserves a freaking loss on his record. I know that's not how it works. I know baseball's fair and that would be unfair, but he lost that game for him despite the fact that we came back and won it. Or stayed in it and won it. So anyway, we get to the 10th inning. Orioles can't score despite the fact having multiple base runners, including the inherited base runner on second, was really pressing to score and did not in that 10th inning. Started to have maybe some negative vibes in your head. But then Albert Suarez comes out, shutting the door down, having just a great outing. A first pitch ground ball to third base, keeping the runner at second. A pop out to shortstop. I don't even know if it got out of the infield. If it did, barely. And then a strikeout, I believe, to end the inning. Albert Suarez really balled up that inning and showed why he's a potential replacement for Kimbrel. Maybe the least likely coming into the season at least. But at this point, Albert Suarez can be very intriguing in that save situation, and you saw why right there. You see what happens when relievers come on to start an inning, essentially, with a runner on second. Whether it's in extra innings like that or just in the middle, it's hard to it's hard to keep that guy off the scoreboard. It's very tough, right? And Albert Suarez did a masterclass job in that 10th inning. In the 11th inning, Ryan Mountcastle went Yahtzee off our old friend. God, my brain wants to say Hudson Haskins, one of our minor league outfielders. Hunter Harvey. I knew it was an HH. Our old friend Hunter Harvey, Mountcastle went Yahtzee off of him for the second time in his career with only his second at-bat. It's actually unbelievable. His old teammate, good friend, Hunter Harvey, 2 at-bats against him, both went Yahtzee. So Orioles then get up to 5-3 now. 5-3. I'm back. Orioles are definitely back. You're thinking, okay, we're feeling good again. We're going to get this win, and hopefully, for me, it can stay that 2-run win. Well, not exactly. Suarez came out for that inning and didn't get shelled by any means. Let off a hit. Then there was a ground rule double that Orioles may have gotten lucky on. I want to believe Cowser would have gotten that relay in to either get the runner at home or just hold the runner at third. You'll never know. Ball bounced over the wall. And so runners had to stop at second and third. End up tying the game after that. Neither here or there. Suarez got it to the 12th. It was still, while he didn't come and close the door like he did in that 10th inning, he was still able, once the pressure was really on, to make sure the game stayed going. He did that. And he continued the game for us, and he got us to that 12th inning. So overall, A+ from Suarez, even if technically he blew that closing out opportunity because he was in line for the win, so it wouldn't have been the save. But technically a save situation without the actual save on the line, if that makes sense. A+ performance by Albert Suarez, and he's a guy you love to have, and really has quickly become a guy that not only is a mainstay in that bullpen, I think, and not at all on the verge of going down, but a guy that you trust almost just as much as anyone in that bullpen right now. And that's saying a lot, because there are names like Keegan Aiken, Danny Kalum, Yanir Cano, like a good amount of names that you feel very, very comfortable about. Hell, Jacob Webb has been very impressive recently. In fact, Webb would come in an inning later, but we'll get to that. In the 12th inning, Mateo, who I believe was leading off the inning, you have the inherited runner at second, hits a single down the third baseline, I believe it was. But really, it was just a single, an errant throw. It brings home Westberg, but an errant throw allows Mateo to get to second. They then try to throw the ball to second. It sails into the outfield, deep into right center. Mateo doesn't see it at first because CJ Abrams is pretending to hold the tag on him. He then hears it, sees it, understands, gets himself to third base, possibly had a chance to come home there, but with no outs, you keep that man at third base, and everything looked great. And then it got scary for a second where Mateo looked like he couldn't breathe. I thought he might have punctured a lung or something, broken a rib, something stupid to where it might not have hit him at first, and then, like, it did. In fact, I was just watching this Netflix show, or it's some Netflix show. You probably know it, the Welcome to Wrexham show, the Ryan Reynolds and Mac from Always Sunny bought the soccer team, and their star player in the preseason actually got his ribs broken and punctured a lung, and it kind of looked like that, just like scared and like not being able to breathe. Luckily for us, Mateo was fine. Luckily for us, it was just the wind knocked out of him. I believe, still a little worried with the off day today that the Orioles wouldn't announce an injury until tomorrow if there was something wrong. So we'll keep an eye on that, but there's no news to report as far as that, because even in the post-game interview, like, he looked good, sounded good, said he was good, said he just got the air knocked out of him, and it happens. So anyway, Mateo gets the third, nobody out. We end up knocking him home, or not even knocking him home, getting him home on a wild pitch, taking again a 2-run lead. Just pulling at my heartstrings with this -1.5. So then we go to the bottom of the 12th. Jacob Webb gives up a leadoff RBI single. So there goes my 1.5. Then now there goes my cover. However, he's then able to get 3 straight outs, close out the game. The Orioles pick up the win, finally, 7-6 overall. It was scary. I mean, not scary, but it was intense. It was an intense baseball game. And it's kind of funny because that whole series really hadn't had much offense and much runs and much excitement, it felt like. And then, boom, that bottom of the 9th into extra innings creates just this run, essentially, of 2-run innings, pretty much. The Nationals get a 2-run inning in the 9th. The Orioles and Nationals each get a 2-run inning in the 11th. And then the Orioles get a 2-run inning in the 12th. Unfortunately, the Nationals did get that 1 run for me and my bank account, but that's neither here or there. We're okay. Not a problem. I'd rather the Orioles victory always, gang. So, escape with a 1-1 split. And like I mentioned earlier, extended the sweepless streak to 103 series now for the Orioles. Unbelievable. Essentially, 2 years worth of series. Like, it's unfathomable that the Orioles just don't get swept. It's an amazing, amazing thing. And it's so exciting, gang. And it just shows how this team never quits, how talented this roster is, top to bottom, and how they just don't give up. They don't get those bad vibes. The good vibes are always there. The good vibes are always clicking. And you love it. Absolutely freaking love it. Also, like I mentioned earlier, this gets the Orioles record to 24-12 after the first 36. I'm sure if you listened to that episode back when I released it in spring training and you heard me saying the Orioles need to win 24 of the first 36 games, you'd be looking at me going, okay, that's a little much. That's a little too much to expect. We can't expect the Orioles to do that good. We expect them to do good, but that's a lot of games in the first, that's a lot of wins in the first 36. Like, if you go by win percentage, it's impossible to keep that 2 out of 3 wins going the entire course of the season. But that's not what I was preaching that they would do. I was preaching it because it allowed the Orioles to set a foundation to guarantee themselves into the playoffs, which is what I think they've already done. Listen, you can't win it all early into the season in the first 36 games, but you could lose it in the first 36 games. The Orioles haven't done either, but what they did was create that foundation and allow themselves to not only win the AL East again, not only get to 100 wins again, be the best record in the AL again, and potentially the best record in baseball, gang. And that's what we have on our hands because these guys found a way. And imagine how many more wins we'd have if we didn't have maybe some back end of the bullpen problems. Like if we had Felix Bautista shutting down every game. Well, that probably turns to at least 26, not 27, 28. And imagine if everybody was really clicking offensively, especially in the first half of those 36 games. Think about that. In the first 18 games, we had some outstanding offensive players for sure. Clearly, Gunnar, Adley, Cowser was going off then. But we also had some great performances. The Austin Hayes struggles, the Ramon Urias struggles, obviously Jackson Holliday struggles when he was up. Like, not everything has been pretty and easy. Santander and Mullins haven't had the best stretches at times during this season. Like, I'm just being real with you, gang. Like, the idea that they had 24 wins and they weren't playing their best baseball for most of it, they weren't at full health through any of it. Truly, still they're not at full health. We don't have Austin Hayes at the moment. We don't have Grayson Rodriguez at the moment. Like, we thought as soon as Bradish and Means got back, we'd be fully healthy. That's not the case. That wasn't the case. Unfortunately, it worked the other way where some guys came and some guys went. Now, luckily, the guys that went seemed to have nothing seriously wrong. If anything, I believe in Grayson Rodriguez's case, it might have been a bit of gamemanship. Again, roster manipulation, innings manipulation. We'll see. And frankly, we'll never know. I'm never going to look at Grayson Rodriguez's shoulder. And even if I did, I wouldn't know if it was inflamed at any point or not. Unless a doctor said, you see this? That right there is inflammation. In which case, he could be pointing to the elbow bone and be like, this is shoulder inflammation. And I'd be like, huh. Looks right to me, doc. Certainly not my level of expertise. But I love seeing the Orioles just set themselves up with that 24 wins through the first 36 games. Special, gang. It's special. And it's especially special because I sat here a month and a half, 2 months ago, breaking that down, saying that that's where we need to be after the first 36. And guess what? The schedule that we were looking at ended up being a lot tougher than we expected. And they still got there, gang. Still got there. It's exciting. It's so exciting to know where these Orioles are at. I love it. Absolutely love it. So, the two starters that started in that national series for us was Corbin Burnes, Kyle Bradish. And it's very cool now with Bradish back to see them kind of back-to-back games and starting in that 1-2 spot. And certainly a lot of times you'd expect the Orioles to take both those games. And I think that's going to be the case. Okay, again, this national series gets a little funky every time. There's always some weirdness. So, and it's only a 2-game set. Put that in the past, small sample size. The idea of Burnes and Bradish together, and Bradish looks himself, right? They both look great. Now, Burnes has had struggles in the first inning, but really has dominated every other inning since then. Sure, that wasn't the case 2 nights ago in Washington, but where he had his struggles, I believe, in the 2nd and then the 7th. But overall, Corbin Burns has been exactly what we expected him to be, exactly as advertised, and truly that ace. Now we get to peg him with one of last year's Cy Young finalists in Kyle Bradish, who's come back looking exactly like he has last year. Truly, everything is looking fantastic right now for Kyle Bradish, and it's special to see the idea of those two going back to back. And it really is such a blessing to have at the top of this rotation, okay? Even more so because Grayson Rodriguez, even though he's getting better, and we'll touch on that in a second, and he really wasn't necessarily that banged up, if banged up at all, who knows? Mike Elias and those folks know, but none of us will probably ever know. It's especially great that we can keep that top tier 2 in the rotation and see what else we got. And right now, what else we got is unbelievable. If you add a healthy GrayRod into that trio now, like I said yesterday or 2 days ago, it's most likely the best pitching trio in baseball right now. You might call me crazy. Maybe you have one or two that you can be like, oh, no, this. You want to pick Wheeler, Nola, and who? I mean, Ranger Suarez? Okay. But my point is that, listen, maybe the Dodgers, oh, you want to point to Glass now, Yamamoto, and I believe they just got back, Walker Buehler. Okay, fine. But I can argue that the Orioles' top 3 is just as good, if not better, than all of them. And I think when the season continues to progress and we see those 3 consistently, and you wind up seeing their numbers over the course of a whole year, I don't know if anyone's going to touch those top 3, gang. And hopefully GrayRod's healthy, and seems like he is. But, again, we'll touch on that with a little injury news. And then, like I said, you see what else you got? Well, after those 3, I mean, you're looking at Dean Kramer, whose ERA is sitting right in the low to mid 3s, has looked very solid for the most part, and really battled and been able to pitch deeper into games, 5, 6. I think he even had a 7 in there. Cole Irvin, who just came off of, I believe, a streak of 22 1/3 scoreless innings. I mean, again, we talked Cole Irvin and how he was in the best shape of his life and really seemed to take this new focus and energy into his game into this year and create more movement. And it's exciting. It's very exciting. Oh, and then you also have John Means, who just came back and pitched 7 scoreless in his first game back. And the idea of John Means getting back to the 2019, I believe, Cy Young form that he was in when he threw a no-hitter. I mean, the idea of that is unbelievable. Now that I think about it, I think it was 2021, not 2019. That's at least when the no-hitter was, I believe. And I think his best year. Neither here or there. John Means, the idea of potentially pitching like a Cy Young candidate also? Gang, you're talking about definitely the most undervalued starting pitching staff in Major League Baseball right now, and potentially the best starting pitching staff in Major League Baseball right now. Yeah, there's not much negative to say on it, gang. So when you catch me glowing, when you catch me just ranting about how great everything is with it, it's kind of because it is. It's kind of because it is. All right. So let's get to what everyone's talking about in Baltimore today. What all the Orioles blogs are about. What all the Orioles comments are about. Craig Kimbrel, man. I mean, what can you say? He blew the game again last night. Was down to the final out. Was looking good. And then gives up the solo home run. Fine. Cost me my bet. Get it back on the rails and close out the game, man. And it just seems like the second it starts getting off the rails, it gets off the rails quick for him. And that's my concern, is that it snowballs so quickly. You wind up walking back-to-back batters, or like he did 2 nights ago. But that's not the first time. Like, in that Oakland series, he was getting into trouble walking guys and just having no command, man. And it's not like these umps are always squeezing them, and that's why he's walking guys. I mean, he's throwing it a foot over the zone, throwing it into the dirt, a 55-foot breaking ball, or even fastball. I will get to where I see it going, but first, I have this stat. For his last 5 appearances for a closer, right? So you'd anticipate how many innings? 5? Not even half that. 2 1/3 innings pitched in his last 5 appearances. He's given up 6 earned runs, 4 blown saves in those 5 appearances, an ERA of 23.14. Okay. You can say small sample size. You can say got a little out of whack. You could say even hurt his back. That's a convenient answer if we want to run that one, and he's just trying to grit it out. And even if the Orioles want to put him on the IL, he's refusing. And it's just one of these things where he's like, I'm fine. Even though he knows his back still hurts. Maybe that's the case. That's convenient because he did hurt himself. But you know, he didn't need to rehab. Yeah, he took a couple days off. And, a couple of these were like, oh, we threw him back to back and we don't want to do that. And it was over usage. And, okay, well, last night he came in after 3 days off. And he still stunk. Not right away again. Well, technically right away he stunk by almost plugging the guy in his ear, giving him a haircut with his first pitch. Luckily, didn't hit him, didn't put a man on. Because Lord knows if we survive that inning, if he plunks that guy. Because again, he got him out. Then he got the next guy out. And then, okay, a solo home run. You're still up by 1, man. Reset, refocus. Nobody on. Just get the man. It's the number 9 hitter at that point. Can't do it. Falls off the rails. Walks him. Leaves the game. We give up the single, which ties the game. Luckily, we're able not to lose the game. We're able to keep it going, extend the game, keep extending the game as we talked about until eventually we win. Unfortunately, by only 1 run for me, but take the win. But what do we do with Craig Kimbrel? I know Orioles Nation right now, if you go to any Orioles posts and you look at the comments, if you go to any blogs or anything and you read any of it, they're calling for his head. And frankly, I could go back a couple weeks ago. I was starting to call for his head. I think I called for his head after his first appearance when he blew that game, allowing the guy to steal 2nd and 3rd. And I said, this is not going to cut it. And then I had an apology to Craig Kimbrel, where I said, I'm sorry, Craig. He got into that nice groove, was getting not just saves, but 1, 2, 3 saves for the most part. Like, no runners on type saves, perfect inning type deals, however you want to phrase it, right? But, so I apologized. I said, I'm sorry. It felt like I was calling for your job too early. Well, now all of Birdland is pretty much calling for the man's job. And it doesn't seem like Brandon Hyde and Mike Elias are there yet. It doesn't. If you look at their quotes, if you read their words, like they still talk about how he's a piece we need and we need to get him right. And we trust he will get right because he's this established veteran and he knows the process and he knows how to work through it. Great to all that, gang. Great to all that. I could see the scenario where they stick with him. And even by next outing, he's back. 1, 2, 3 innings. Boom. Getting the saves. Easy. He worked it out. And things got better. Unfortunately, I truly believe things are only going to get better for them to eventually get worse again. That's the problem, is that it does seem like a roller coaster. And that is something that the Philadelphia faithful warned me about when we signed him this offseason. And again, I kind of knew that. But it just takes on a different vibe when this is your team and this is the games you're watching every inning of and this is what you care about. And then you're like, ugh, I don't know how much longer I can put up with this. And again, I'm worried that we're going to get drawn in by some false positives or him reverting back to the positive. And then we get our hopes up again. And listen, time frame in baseball is funny, man. Things happening at certain times allows you to be able to make the move before you have to. If things happen at a different time, it's too late to make the move. So let me give you this scenario. Hypothetically, whether it's next appearance or in a week or two, eventually Kimbrel works himself out of this, gets back to being very solid, and really seems like he has that going for even over a month. Let's call it 2, even 3 months. It's May now, so that would put us in August. And then in August, it starts to slip. And then September, it gets very bad. Well, then we're past the trade deadline. We only can go in-house options at that point, or maybe guys that got bought out, a la like Giolito last year or something along those lines. But like, you're probably not going to get the best option at that point. So let me make the opposite hypothetical. Kimbrel maybe gets back right, or maybe doesn't. Maybe just continues to plummet. But let's just assume that he gets back right. And it's good. And it's really good for the next month. And we get to maybe month and a half, and we get to the All-Star break. And he's been really good for a month and a half, and all of these are in the past. Do you still make a move for a closer? Do you still improve upon that closer role? Because I don't believe Kimbrel can keep it going. Once he gets this right, keep it going forever. Now, again, things happen at different times, and good and bad, right? So let's play one last hypothetical scenario, right? Kimbrel gets right out of this streak, gets right. And around a little before All-Star break starts, kind of showing a little bullshit again and kind of getting hit around. But then after the All-Star break, he comes back and he's showing some good stuff again. And then in August, heading into September, it starts taking a turn again to the worst. But then mid-September, maybe he gets it back. And then through September and October, maybe we have a shutdown Craig Kimbrel. I mean, listen, I tell you, I am an eternal optimist. My friends joke that I'm the biggest optimist they know out there. And God, that just does not sound like a likely scenario. At least not one that's going to continue being good until the end of the World Series. You can say it continues to be good until the end of the season because maybe that last bad was the end of the season. And that's what we don't want. We don't want to have to get in one of these series and playoff situations and need to close out games and have a guy who will not close out games for us. And then it starts getting ugly in that last game or two of the playoffs. And there's no time to adjust. There's nowhere to go. It's just done. That seems more likely to me than the idea of even ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. Kimbrel having that upturn in the biggest part of the season and continuing without any falters. And if he does have a falter, not allowing that to snowball. I just don't see it, gang. I don't. And we'll talk about a prediction. In fact, I'll get to the prediction now. I was going to save it to the end, but screw that. I'll get to the prediction now. We're going to trade for a closer. Or at the very least, I put closer / high leverage reliever. Because I do think that there's the potential that we more go in-house for the quote-unquote closer. And more often than not, that's the guy we are trusting to close out the games for us. But we want to add another high leverage reliever because at that point, we'd probably be cutting Kimbrel and needing to bring up somebody. Now, we have a lot of good in-house options. We'll talk about that when we get to the Norfolk section. But then we have a lot of good options already in the majors, gang. We've talked about some of the names. Suarez, Cano, Colomb, Aiken. Hell, I thought Dylan Tate before he went down had a chance also. Now, looking less likely. And hell, I still think Tyler Wells, when he comes back, could be that guy. I was talking about that last episode. So, in-house options both in the majors and in the minors, but ultimately the prediction will be that we will trade for a closer / high leverage reliever. And I've jotted down 5 names, okay? These aren't the only 5 names out there. They might not even be available now or even when it comes. But these were 5 names that intrigued me as guys who are having good seasons, guys that have had at least a decent track record, and guys that we can plug into those high leverage situations, whether it be the 9th inning or wherever it may fall, 6, 7, 8. So, Edwin Diaz from the Mets. Mets had gotten him from the Mariners, I believe, a couple years ago. I want to say he's either on the last year of his deal or maybe has 1 year left after this. Either way, he's been a little up and down, but when he's on, he's one of the best closers in baseball. And he's been in that role for a few seasons. He's worked through some problems because a couple years ago, or maybe last season, whichever it was, he had a really, really tough year. And so, working through stuff, in fact, last season, he was actually hurt, I believe, for the whole year because he got hurt after the World Baseball Classic, or celebrating in the World Baseball Classic, if I remember correctly. Neither here or there. That's a name that I've kind of penciled in. Diaz from the Mets. Michael Kopech, who's a name I've had on my radar for a few years for the White Sox. Now, everyone thinks of him as a starter. This year, they moved him to the pen, and he's actually excelled. To me, he's always felt kind of like this guy that could be a good starter, like a number 3 starter, or an ace in the bullpen. Like a closer. He's got electric stuff and hard throwing pitcher. But since he's moved to the pen, I believe his stuff is up over 3 miles an hour also. Obviously, not having to save stuff for later in the games. Just 1 inning, giving it your all. So a guy like that is very intriguing. And the White Sox stink so bad. And since they've kind of given up on him as this starter, they probably hold him with less value, and probably we could make a trade for not very much for Kopech at a certain point, I believe. Now, a guy that on the opposite end we'd probably have to give up a lot for a closer, which is a little crazy because we're assuming Batista is coming back healthy next year. So why would we give up a lot? Well, we have such a depth of prospects and talent, right? That we can still give up a lot without giving up anything top tier in our system, okay? So the name is Miller, Mason Miller, I believe. Miller from Oakland. We saw him close out the games on us. Kid throws like 103, 104. I mean, electric stuff. First year, they have 6 more years of control on him. So you're saying, why on earth would the A's trade him? Well, because that's what the Oakland A's do. And you can be like, well, they're trying to be more competitive next year in Sacramento, but it's still like 3 years out from Vegas, and that's really when they're trying to be competitive. And the idea of Billy Beane looking at this closer, I could very well see him being like, you're telling us we can get a haul for some young closer who will probably blow out his arm at some point in the next year or two? And I hate to say that, but I mean, you're throwing well over 100 consistently. I mean, arms blow out all the time, unfortunately, gang. So I could see the Orioles doing that. Because, again, you could probably package a nice deal that the A's would look at and be like, this is a really nice package we can't refuse. And meanwhile, then you bring in this stud young reliever who throws harder than anyone in baseball. And he could be your setup man to Batista next year. And you never know how Batista's going to come back. And so it's an insurance on Batista. So that's the name to me that makes by far the most sense. And I think we're really one of the only teams that could afford to get him. Not that we're one of the only teams that could put together a package of prospects to get him, but I think that we're the only team that could package the prospects for him without really depleting our system or giving up our top prospects for him. I think that they would settle for a handful of our second to third dairy prospects. Like I mentioned, the Hudson Haskins of the world. I'm trying to think of the Florida outfielder we got. Jeb, something like that. Whatever. Neither here or there. You pick your guy, man. But it's one of these things I don't think we'd have. I know we wouldn't give up Holiday, Norby. I don't think we'd give up Norby. I don't think we'd give up Basalo. Like these top names, Povich, McDermott, we're not giving them up. And we could still go get maybe the best young reliever in baseball with 6 years of control. I think that that's a move that, okay, so early on I had pipe dreams of a Mike Trout trade. Okay, that I wanted to get that out in the Oriole verse. And unfortunately, while I might have picked up the smallest, tiniest bit of steam, unfortunately, Mike Trout hurt his knee and is out for an extended period of time, maybe the whole season, who knows? And it's just a shame. And after the injury, it's something that I'm not going to advocate for us to trade for him anymore. Part of it was that he was playing at such a high level, which I expected, because again, came out with this theory before the season even started. I was on him being back, and I was just saying, hopefully he stays healthy. Well, fortunately, that wasn't the case. Maybe it's not going to be as bad as some make it seem. Maybe it is. I don't know. Feel bad for Trout, but ultimately, I have to move on with my dream target of a trade, and I think Mason Miller from the Oakland A's is that guy. And we can give them a package they can't refuse without giving up anybody that we would refuse. I think we're the only team in baseball that can pull it off. Now, two other names that are slightly intriguing to me are Tanner Scott from Miami, I think Adam or Helsley, whatever it is, from St. Louis. And both are having decent years. Both are solid. Both are on losing teams. The Miami one, they're just giving away people. So I think Tanner Scott could be a name maybe we bring in for next to nothing. It could be like the move before the move, okay? Like, we could bring in Tanner Scott to still just feeling out Kimbrel and see how it all pieced together, see what we have with him if we trust him in a closer role or somebody else, and then if ultimately we don't trust any of them, that's when you can make the move for like a Miller or somebody real like a Diaz or something along those lines. So that's my prediction, gang. We're kind of going out of order today, at least how I wrote it down, but you won't know any different. You won't know any different other than me telling you. All right? So let's talk about a couple Orioles that are injured currently and in rehab assignments. Austin Hayes trying to come back from, I believe it was the quad or hammy or calf, one of those parts of the leg. And it wasn't serious, but he's been out a couple weeks. And we know he started very slow. So it's phenomenal to see him come out and in his first two rehab games, not only have great days, but go Yahtzee. Hit a home run in each of those games. The first one especially, I think, was a moonshot. And Hazy just feeling healthy, feeling comfortable, and really with his timing back. So it was a great thing to see. Hayes absolutely doing fantastic in his rehab. And Grayson Rodriguez, we talked about how we have inklings that he's not even hurt. It's kind of the vibe I'm getting. You see him in the dugout. He seems perfectly healthy, perfectly fine, perfectly happy. Nobody seems worried. Nobody seems concerned. In fact, he had his first bullpen session in Washington. Only 15 pitches off the mound, but everything felt good, he said. And that's a great thing. It's a great thing to see GrayRod, whether he was a little hurt or not, neither here or there, just ramping back up and ready to rejoin the team, in a week or so. And that's going to bring me to the possibility of a sixth-man rotation, okay? Now, especially with Corbin Burnes, he's the type that loves to pitch every fifth game. So I don't think he would be in on the real six-man rotation, right? I believe that they would look at it and go, Corbin, and they did this earlier to make sure he's starting on time. Corbin, you're going to still pitch every fifth game. The first of every 5 games you are pitching. But then you have 5 other guys that are kind of rotating behind him. Broadening guys' innings, making sure they're not getting overworked. But also just who are you going to take out, right? Let's just say today Grayson Rodriguez was healthy and coming back into the rotation. Clearly Burnes, Bradish, and GrayRod are in there. So then you have Suarez has already gone to the pen, despite being great. So you have Kramer, Means, and Irvin. And we touched on it. Kramer has had a consistently great year, going deeper into games, looking good, getting out of jams, not allowing things to snowball on him. ERA right in the mid to low threes. Cole Irvin was going from looking like he was the outside guy to possibly can't take out because, again, 22 and a third, I believe, innings scoreless for Cole Irvin in that stretch. Incredibly impressive. And then you got John Means, who clearly should be one of the guys in the rotation, and came back with 7 scoreless. And if he continues to pitch like that, which I'll be the first one to say, I don't necessarily fully expect, but I would love, I would enjoy, and we saw it in that first game. So if that just continues, or at least something close to that continues in the sense of just pitching really well and not allowing many runners or runs, I mean, if the real John Means is back, you can't pull him. So then you're like, okay, Kramer or Irvin. But again, what are you going to do there, right? Where are you going to take that? I think the 6-man rotation at that point fits everything best. And that would allow you to pitch one of them in a blowout game. Maybe we're getting crushed one night early and we can just throw them in, and then that for that week or so, it's a 5-man rotation. Or we just, again, skip the 6th man when it's Corbin Burnes and then start up that 6-man rotation again. And so everybody's getting a little bit extra time other than Corbin Burnes, who we know doesn't want the extra time. So I think 6-man rotation makes a heck of a lot of sense just because they're pitching too well to take them out, man. Why would we do that? And also it allows us not to strain guys who maybe are coming back from injuries like Means, like Bradish, like now GrayRod. And it allows us to keep guys who are performing well in Irvin and Kramer, stay in the rotation and not drop them out for no reason other than just we only want 5 starting pitchers. I don't know. We already have Suarez in the pen, so we now don't really need a long man in the pen, right? And now if you're moving let's say, Cole Irvin to the pen. Now you have 2 long guys, which is okay and possible. But again, where are these spots coming? Where are these spots going? You can essentially do the same thing, just keep them on the rotation. And if you need to go with that second long guy, then you can pluck the right one in Irvin or a Kramer and insert him in that game as a long guy. That's what I think makes the most sense personally. So, since we went all out of order, we're going to end on something different than I told you we would end before. But basically, our last segment today is going to be going back down to the farm, checking out Norfolk. Now, what's funny is there was at least one guy in AA, if not multiple guys in AA I wanted to highlight, and I forgot to write it down. I'm not sure if it was Hudson Haskins, who I believe hit a big home run. I want to say it was some cooler names. Judd Fabian, that was the name I was thinking earlier. I know he's doing really well. Again, I can't remember exactly who I want to talk about with AA Bowie. But as far as AAA goes, the Norfolk Tides, we know they had incredible success early. We know these players have had incredible success. Heston Kjerstad, who's now in the majors at the moment, at least at the moment, won Player of the Month for the International League. Cade Povich won Pitcher of the Month last month. Okay. I mean, these are names, obviously. Heston's already up. Povich, we've been talking about coming up, hopefully sooner rather than later, or at least doing everything he can to get himself a spot. I just don't know where the spot is this year, at the moment at least. I mean, hell, we're already talking 6-man rotation just to get guys those starts. Can't make it 7 or 8. I'm sorry. So, other than those, Chase McDermott or Chance McDermott, I always forget if it's Chase or Chance. I swear there's a Y. Neither here or there. Our second best pitching prospect, I would say. Player of the week last week in the International League. So accolades all over for these Norfolk Tides in AAA. Also, Kyle Stowers continues just to hit bombs. I know he's hit at least a couple in the past few games. Kobe Mayo had a streak of 4 straight games with a home run. I mean, Kobe Mayo, I read an article earlier the other day about how there's a decent chance Kobe Mayo actually may get to the majors quicker than Jackson Holliday, at least in the sense of which one could come up next. And because Holliday's, of course, already been up and Mayo has not, so we'll see. But there's some talk that Mayo might be the next guy up. Certainly possible. I still think, based if nothing more, just because Holliday's the number 1 prospect, they want a lefty batting second baseman, which they don't have right now. And that Kobe Mayo's strikeout rate is kind of alarmingly high. Now, it's in the 30s. Now, last year, I believe it was just like 21, 22%. Now, like I said, it's ticked all the way into the 30s, which is a red flag. Now, he is the type of light tower power that can combat that. I mean, we've seen that in types like Joey Gallo and stuff like that, where, listen, he might not bat 200, but when he hits the ball, it's going to probably leave the park. Okay, there might be some benefit of that. I don't see the Orioles rushing him up, especially after Jackson Holliday struggled, and Heston Kjerstad hasn't looked great, and Cone Cowser last year struggled. I don't necessarily see them rushing him back with those red flags. I still think ultimately they want to make sure he focuses also on his defense, which is improving, and just rounding out his game some before they bring him up. So I still think Holliday has a better chance at coming up sooner than Mayo in the near future. Now, Holliday's had some success. He started off slow in his first few games, or 2 or 3 games back in AAA. He was started off slow, finally started to hit again. He's 5 for his last 10 and has hit in 3 straight games. Had a home run last night, has had multiple extra base hits. It's funny, in our last episode, I said I thought he might have hit a home run. He hadn't at that point. Has hit a home run now, back in AAA. And he's just obviously working on what he needs to. I read something, and it was along the lines of kind of what I've been preaching with Jackson Holliday, which he now understands exactly what he needs to improve on. Major League Pitching has told him exactly what he needs to focus on and improve on to be successful. And while nobody's talking about a timeline for him, I really do believe that the chance of maybe in a week or two, him coming up is a real possibility. Again, you sort of have a dead roster spot right now, I would say, with Heston Kjerstad up, okay? Where he's not getting a ton of playing time. He's not he doesn't really have a spot on this team for consistent playing time, right? And while Mateo has been pretty solid for us, and I love him this year, Urias has turned it on and been a little better. I still think, though, getting a successful Holiday, maybe not at the top of what he will be, but just better than what he was, is ultimately better for the team at second base every day than one of those two guys. I think Mateo works best as that role, situational, versatile, utility guy. And Ramon, works best more as a defensive replacement late in games that if he does get an at-bat, could have a nice clutch moment. I think that plays more. And I also think that it would do some benefit to Jordan Westburg not having to move back and forth between third and second as much as he is. So, Holiday finally showing what we've always seen from him at every level. I think he's truly working on what he needs to work on to be successful his next time up. And frankly, I'm hoping that it's going to be in a couple weeks. Maybe towards the end of May. Preakness Day, something around those lines. I would love it. I would absolutely love it. And either way, this team is just in a great situation, okay? Now, I've been wanting to talk about this topic, and I'm not going to go into it today, but I guess I'll give you a small preview before we get out of here about how, that balancing act the Orioles have with wanting guys that can contribute right now and the best possible team, while also developing the prospects in a way that's going to make them their best possible self and thus the best possible team that we can have in the years to come. And it's really tough to have both playing against each other, because if just, let's say we look at something like Ryan McKenna, who I advocated to be on this team and has shown reasons why he should be on this team in his early stint so far, you could argue it'd be better to have Heston Kjerstad take any at-bats that he's having. You could argue that Kyle Stowers being up is better than him. Now, I think at that point you're forgetting righty-lefty and you're not taking all that into account. And once Austin Hayes comes back, that adds another righty to it, which might mean that McKenna drops down. And then we still have Heston. So what do we do with Heston? Because then we would still have four. Now he would be a fifth outfielder. So, and you start to worry that sometimes, like we talked about this with the Nationals the past couple years, while they're playing very good, scrappy baseball and tough baseball, the last couple years they allowed these prospects to kind of stink a bit as much as they needed to in order to succeed. Okay? And it didn't matter because they weren't competing for a World Series. We are competing for a World Series. So there is some of this give or take that we might be handicapping our top prospects and how quickly they can ascend to their peak. Hell, we might even be handicapping them to the point where they can't ascend to their full peak. And that sucks. And that may hinder us a little bit down the line. But ultimately, you have to do what's best for the team right now. And you have to make sure you're playing the best roster every night that you can possibly play. And you have the best bench and the best role players that you could possibly have. And it sucks to have these top prospects and not be able to give them time and not be able to allow them to come up and work through that in the majors. But that's just where we're at, gang. Listen, there are good and bad in everything. And when you have this much talent and this much success and this much promise and this much excitement and this much hope that we might win the World Series this year, I'm sorry, I have to sacrifice a little somewhere. And it might be ultimately in the prospects not developing fully or not developing as fast as maybe they would if, let's say, they were with the Oakland A's or the Washington Nationals and they could play every day for 2 straight years and work out all the kinks and then come into their 3rd season ready to roll, and that's when they start winning. Don't have that luxury, gang. Seems like we have every other luxury in the book right now, knock on wood. But again, there's a yin and a yang to everything. There's a black and a white, a good and a bad. That's just the bad of all the good that we have. And it is good. So I don't want to end on a somber tone. It's a good problem to have, gang. And frankly, there are going to continue to be injuries, and there's going to be continued movement with the team and the roster, and guys are going to come up and down, and hopefully by the end of it, we have the best possible roster that we possibly can have. So with that being said, gang, we're going to call a wrap on this episode. Orioles are off today, so we come back tomorrow with a 3-game home stint against the defending National League champion Arizona Diamondbacks, who are not having a good start to their season, but certainly have the talent to turn it around at any time. Little nervous about this series, but feeling very encouraged at the same time, and always excited because I like our guys. And I love this team. And I've been saying it since episode 1. We're the most talented, best team in baseball. I truly believe that. Team has no quit in them. All fight. Always believing. Always energized. Always keeping those vibes high. Special things happening in Birdland. And a great foundation set up in the first 36 games as they go 24-12. Gotta love it, gang. Gotta love it. Let's just hope that that's one of the many predictions that come right for me and these Orioles this season. A lot of good things for us in store if that's the case. So we're going to call this episode at that, gang. It was episode 23 of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. Let's go, O's!
Talking baseball, baseball and